Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you. I'm just going to talk about the Mandalorian and Grogu and do some quick thoughts on its opening box office weekend of release, covering the 4-day Memorial weekend. Now there could potentially be spoilers here for the movie, the series itself, The Mandalorian, and all other movies and television series set within the Star Wars franchise, so just beware when going into this overall video. So when we take a look then at the numbers for the film over the 4-day Memorial weekend, it grossed around $102 million in the US markets, easily claiming the #1 spot that particular weekend. And in terms of international, it took around another $63 to $65 million for a worldwide take of around $165 million in its opening week of release. So when we look at these numbers then, I think overall, in terms of the movie itself, and in comparison to the Star Wars franchise, I would say that this is a decent to a solid opening. Now, of course, it's miles away from what we would normally expect from a Star Wars movie, even when we draw reference to the much maligned sequel trilogy. Regardless of what you think about that in terms of its overall quality and what it did to the Star Wars franchise, those did generate massive numbers in terms of box office gross, all grossing over $1 billion minimum. Of course, when we originally started the Star Wars trilogy, in terms of the sequels with Force Awakens, it grossed over $2 billion. So nobody was going into Mandalorian and Grogu expecting anywhere near those type of numbers. We've known for a long time now the Star Wars as a franchise is in clear decline. If it's not completely non-existent, it's close to that, I would say. We've had a whole raft of Star Wars shows on Disney Plus that none of them have really moved the needle in terms of trying to recapture or recover that goodwill set within the Star Wars fandom. We can debate as to whether that's actually a possible situation at all. So the Mandalorian Grogu, in terms of an actual project, it basically has been conceded as to what I felt it would be, is that it essentially is an extended episode of the series and nothing more than that. General consensus has been that it plays out very much lightweight, fun, enjoyable, nothing too serious, nothing too heavy-handed, nothing really too much in terms of hinting at a potential future direction for the Star Wars franchise going forward. It was just meant to be a clear-cut standalone exercise in a fun, entertaining summer blockbuster, and that was really what the Mandalorian series itself was. It was a self-contained story, nothing too much in terms of the wider context of the Star Wars franchise, and I think this movie played into that. So it's played really more into expectations, rather than, I would say, looking to any expansion of the franchise. And I don't think we should have looked at this movie as a barometer as to whether the Star Wars franchise can come back to those massive cinematic heights that it reached, obviously, way back in the late 70s and early 1980s. I don't think we were ever going to look at Mandalorian and Grogu in that light. So again, these type of numbers are solid. Maybe you could say it's some sort of foundation that they can build off. We know the next movie is going to be this Star Fighter film starring Ryan Gosling next year. That movie and its overall turnout, that will be something that we can use to gauge as to whether Star Wars has any future life or prosperity going forward in terms of cinematic prolific or presence. In terms of major success, that will be the film that I think will come under real heavier scrutiny, because at some stage we do have to take Star Wars continuity forward, and I think that's been the biggest problem in terms of the franchise, certainly post Rise of Skywalker, is that it's been stuck in this constant flux of nostalgia. When we look at the Book of Boba Fett, when we look at the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, when we look at the Ahsoka series, all of those series have really been timed back to the past, what was done previously, using previous characters rather than looking to take the franchise forward. This is not something that is just set to Star Wars. You can set it to basically all of the massive cultural IPs, is that we are just relying much more on prequel stories rather than future continuity. So when we take all of that into account, as I said before, I think this is a decent output. This is a decent showing. It's basically going to be a one and done. I think after this weekend, not many people will talk about it. In terms of the overall box office numbers, many analysts are looking at maybe a potential $400 to $500 million gross worldwide when it's all said and done. Again, we have to look at the second weekend to see how it overall performs. And again, for a Mandalorian and Grogu movie, connecting to a series that, again, doesn't really have that mass appeal in terms of a more general, casual, wide space, I think $400 to $500 million is something that's not too bad. So again, this was just a case of They were different around as to whether to proceed with a fourth season of The Mandalorian or whether they should churn a movie out. I suppose, again, it's been 7 years now since the rise of Skywalker, so they thought we might as well just put this out as a movie, as a Star Wars movie, and just see how it performs overall. So I guess the overall question now is, can Star Wars ever make it back to some same level of hype or anticipation or excitement that, if not with the original trilogy, maybe possibly with the prequel trilogy? Again, we refer to the sequel trilogy, which did the box office numbers, but as I've already mentioned, the perception, the real negative perception, that I think really was more impacted by The Last Jedi, if anything else, rather than The Force Awakens, that was the movie that really caused that huge shift and downturn in terms of perception and interest amongst original fans. Now, to answer that question, I would say the answer is no. I don't think it's possible to get back to those same hype levels as the original trilogy. That's a lot, again, to do with how the franchise has been handled, and also really the changes in terms of the culture now, in terms of audience habits, and the fact now we've had the influence of streaming and the increasing costs in ticket prices and just economical costs in general. It's so much more now to go and see a movie, and many audiences are decided to just sit out and wait in and watch these films on streaming, and you can't really blame them for that. And also, again, the downturn in quality in terms of the movies and the series itself. All of these factors have impacted the brand of Star Wars in a negative space. So I don't think it could ever really go back to how it was with the original trilogy. It would literally need a movie to come out, and that film would have to be a game changer in the same way that A New Hope was. And in this current times, I don't think it would be. So I don't think we could ever get back to those same hype levels. The movies, I think, would have to really start going forward in continuity, stop relying so much on nostalgia, try and make a clean slate with newer characters, newer universes, and just go back to those old-fashioned themes of a hero and a villain, the forces of good against the forces of evil. That really was the whole foundation of Star Wars. We weren't really stuck in these themes that we see so much in entertainment today, where we're trying to deconstruct the heroes and maybe make the villains far more sympathetic. Star Wars was very broad. It had the deeper themes in there, yes, but it was very broad in terms of what was good and what was bad, and those clearly defined concepts is what it made it really so accessible and so enjoyable. And I think they need to get back to that going forward. But I think it would need a real series of absolute bangers, not only necessarily in terms of box office, but really in terms of quality, that, again, the mainstream audiences could get behind, and then maybe that could convince the fandom in some way, shape or form to maybe give it another shot. If you are dealing with completely new characters, and if you can somehow bypass the events of the sequel trilogy and just go forward, maybe it's possible that later on down the line you could get maybe 2/3 of the way back to those box office highs of before in terms of the glory days of the franchise. But that's a long way off, and certainly The Mandalorian and Grogu shouldn't be seen as a barometer as whether the Star Wars franchise can really get back to how it was back in the good old days. So there's my overall thoughts and feelings quickly when looking at the box office release of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other further movies, television series, or any other topics for the pop entertainment and culture scene you'd like to see me cover in this channel, also let me know in the comments, and I'll see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you more quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.